All right, welcome everybody. We've got a really exciting day planned with a new Ask Sheila. Today we have Carolina Community Marketing Manager, Sheila Janakos, our CEO of Healthy Horizons, and myself, Azar Aguilar, the Marketing Manager of Healthy Horizons. So today we're going to have some questions that were submitted as a part of Ask Sheila, and then will be asking for live questions from Facebook and YouTube. And if you guys have any questions on any lactation items, anything, that's the theme for today is Ask Anything, please feel free to submit them via those methods. So I'm going to switch over here to our slides. We've got some of these questions were submitted online from different parents across the board. So I've got the first one here from Miriam, and Miriam asks, can my milk change colors based on what I eat?
Absolutely. You could have rainbow milk. And sometimes this is scary for parents because they'll pump and they'll see their milk looking greenish or bright orange, and they'll think there's something wrong with it. But typically it's whatever you ate. So if you've been eating a lot of foods high in beta carotene, you might have orange milk. If you've been eating like sweet potatoes and carrots, if you've been eating things like seaweed and algae, you might have greenish milk. So it's totally fine, and it usually goes away after a couple hours. But if you're nursing directly, you're not going to notice it, right? But it's when you're pumping, you're going to see that. So perfectly fine to have rainbow colored milk.
That could be really fun when they're storing milk in their freezer to have all the different colors of the rainbow.
Oh, this is the day I had pad thai, and this is the day when we had sushi.
Well, I'm so glad you've normalized that for parents, because I know that could be quite the surprise if it's coming out green or orange, like you're saying. So the next question that we have here is from Kayla, and Kayla asks, I have inverted nipples, and I was wondering that I'm a little bit nervous about breastfeeding will be difficult or impossible for me. Is that true?
Absolutely not true. So nipples change throughout pregnancy and as lactation starts. So you may have inverted nipples during pregnancy, but they may come out right after the baby's born. So things can change. The good news is that a baby doesn't latch on to the nipple itself. The baby latches on deeper to the areola, and that's why they call it chest or breastfeeding, not nipple feeding. So the baby needs to get deeper. Some parents will, if they're having some issues, maybe use a breast pump once the baby's born to help bring the nipple out a little bit, or they might use a nipple shield if they really are having trouble with initial attachment. But babies can learn to latch to the areolas perfectly. So I just would suggest that you start working with a lactation consultant right away. That way you could get off to a really good start.
Oh, nice. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I like how you differentiated between nipple feeding and chest or breastfeeding. That makes a lot of sense. So Rosalind asks, I have implants. Is it okay for me to still breastfeed my baby when he arrives this fall?
Absolutely. Implants will not affect breastfeeding, but sometimes the surgeries can have an impact. So it depends on how the surgeries were done. If the implant is behind the chest wall, if the surgery was done through the armpit, or if it was done around the areola or underneath. So depending on where the incisions were, sometimes can impact. If it was done around the areola, there's a lot of nerves there, and sometimes that can impact things a little bit. So you always want to make sure your lactation consultant knows that you did have breast surgery, and then what type of breast surgery you had, so they could work with you early on to make sure you have a good milk supply. But in general, you should do fine with implants.
No, that's really good for parents to know. Good. So Alex asks, should I wash my nipples before breastfeeding?
You do not need to wash your nipples. What I would say is in the morning, whenever you take your shower, it's fine to soap your body up and let the water just rinse. And that's all you need to do. If you are sick, that's a whole different story. You wouldn't need to wash your nipples, but you would want to wash your hands before, and you would want to mask up so you don't breathe on the baby, but your nipples are fine.
No, that's good to know, especially this day and age as far as COVID and everything. I'm glad that you covered that it's not necessary for the nipples for sure. Yeah, my left breast isn't producing as much milk as my right. Is there any way to help this? And will they return to normal size after weaning? They are much different sizes now.
So oftentimes one breast becomes the super breast. And with the next pregnancy, it could actually switch. So that's not uncommon. Oftentimes it's because of the early stimulation that breast received. Maybe the baby was nursing more on that side and latching better, and that side got programmed to make more milk. What some people do is they sometimes will pump the other side to get the milk supply up a little bit to equalize things. But it's fine to have one side that makes more than the other. It's not an issue. After breastfeeding and chest feeding is over with, the breast will return to normal size.
That's really good for parents to know that it'll return after breastfeeding. Good. So the next question that we have is from Shay, and Shay asks, how long will milk stay in my breast after weaning?
So it's really dependent on how long you are actually breast or chest feeding. If you are breast or chest feeding for, let's say, a year or longer, you could have milk in your breast for years. Now, I'm not talking the kind of milk that is like leaking out and you're feeling engorged. I'm talking if you maybe did a little bit of hand expression and you saw a little bit of glistening or a little bit of milk on the tip of your nipple. The milk producing tissue really develops during pregnancy and lactation, and with each pregnancy, it develops more. So you have a higher chance of having milk longer with your other pregnancies, right? So don't worry if you see some milk, it's normal. And it could take, if you breastfed maybe 6 months, it could probably take a couple months for it to totally go away.
That's good to know. 1 to 2 months is a good expectation for parents to have. Wonderful. So the next question that we have here. After drinking a beer, how long do I need to wait before feeding my baby?
Well, the good news is blood alcohol matches the amount of alcohol that's in breast milk. So the alcohol in a drink like this would probably peak around an hour or so after consuming it. And so by 2 hours, it should pretty much be out of your system. So if you really want to be 100% sure that the alcohol's gone, wait 2 hours. You don't need to pump and dump during that time. It's not going to get the alcohol out of your system or your breast milk. So I would say wait a couple hours. A drink here and there is not considered typically an issue. So if you wanted to have that half a glass of wine with dinner here and there, it should be perfectly acceptable. Now, if you're going to have more than 1 or 2, then you might want to think about, like, will I be able to care for my baby? Will I be out of it? Right? So it's more about safety at that point than getting alcohol into the baby.
Yeah, definitely good to differentiate being able to care, and then also if you have one, how long that would be in the system for.
Right.
So that's really good to know. So we've got 2 more questions left. Andy asks, I feel sleepy and a little off when I'm chest feeding my baby. Is this normal?
It's totally normal. There's a couple hormones that are actually in breast milk that can cause that feeling. One is oxytocin actually. And that's the love hormone, the hormone that you bond with, but it also gives you this calming feeling. And that can make people feel a little bit tired, but it's a good hormone. It regulates your heart rate and your blood pressure and does all sorts of good things. So we like that hormone. But that can make you a little tired. The other hormone is also called CCK, and that is cholecystokinin. And that one is produced also through breastfeeding, but also your gut produces it and it helps with satiety. But with breastfeeding, it makes you sleepy. The baby's gut also produces that during breastfeeding. So the baby becomes sleepy too. So you both could become sleepy, which is good. Then you can snuggle up and baby could take a nap and maybe you could take a nap too. But it's totally normal.
A few questions from our live audience.
Thank you. We received some really great questions. So Sheila, my 9-month-old bites when she nurses. How do I stop her?
Oh, well, I always suggest looking for any of those cues. Typically, we see biting if maybe the baby's telling you that she's done, like she's done feeding. She doesn't want to nurse any longer. She wants to go do something else because 9-month-olds are very busy little people. And if you try to force the baby to stay in longer, sometimes you'll see some biting. So be proactive. Look for the signs before. And then when the baby's doing a really good job, let her know. Praise her. Tell her, this doesn't hurt, mommy. This feels good. Lots of positive reward. At 9 months, they know, they could tell tones and they know when you're upset with them. So it's really interesting. You can communicate. If they're doing it over and over again, one technique is you can just push the baby in for a second. It just blocks the nose for 1 second and it kind of startles them and they'll open their mouth. But I love the positive reinforcement one better.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Another great question we got is I see recipes for lactation cookies everywhere. Are these actually helpful and can they be harmful?
Well, I think the only harm would be too much sugar. But the oats and the brewer's yeast and the flaxseed that are often in these cookies are good for you and it's fine to take. And people do feel that it's helpful. Is it a placebo effect? I don't know. But if it makes people happy and they're feeling like it's helpful, then go for it. But I would just watch the amount of sugar.
Does breastfeeding latching change over time?
It absolutely does. And so often I'll have people with an older baby who is, maybe starting to do some acrobatics during nursing. They'll latch very shallow. And it looks like it's a terrible latch, but as long as everybody's comfortable, it really doesn't matter. But sometimes we do need to actually bring the baby back to the breast and work with the latch a little bit. But yeah, they'll change their latch definitely. And you'll be so surprised how far a nipple can stretch and still be comfortable.
Yeah, we know that from pumping.
Correct.
I want to breastfeed past 12 months, but how do I balance the solids and eating enough?
Okay. So by the time a person is feeding a 12-month-old compared to a 1-month-old or a 2-month-old, it's very, very different. You're nursing 8 to 16 times a day in the beginning. By 12 months, you're maybe nursing 2 to 4 times a day in general. And the baby would be getting solids 3 times a day by that point, plus probably 2 snacks. So the nursing would be more like in the morning, maybe around nap time, and then maybe in the evening. So it's more as a extra. The main source of nutrients at this point are going to be solid foods.
That ties into our next question.
Okay.
There's a few more. Can you please explain the new AAP recommendations? So that's the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Absolutely. So up until recently, the American Academy of Pediatrics was recommending that babies be breastfed exclusively. That means nothing else is being fed to this baby for the first 6 months. And then after 6 months, the introduction of solids and the baby being breastfed for at least a year or longer. So everything else is the same now except the last part. Now it's at least 2 years or longer. And when we say nursing at 2 years, it's not nursing, again, like 8 times a day. It may be once a day. It may be once every other day. It can really vary as the baby gets older. I've definitely had parents who told me they were nursing once a week. So, and there's still enough milk for that one time a week. So That's what that recommendation means. And you might ask, why do they say 2 years? Because we know that it takes at least 5 years for the baby's immune system to fully develop. So even this little amount of breast milk here and there is going to be super helpful. And it also helps normalize a baby's nutrition, because if anybody's had a toddler before, they'll go days with like eating hardly anything. And you're like, how are they surviving? And if they're getting some breast milk here and there, they're getting all those nutrients. So it helps normalize, and just kind of like that little insurance policy.
That's great. 2 more questions.
Okay.
Why does one breast make more milk than the other? And why does my milk supply drop a week before my period or during?
Okay, so those are 2 separate questions. We don't know why one breast makes more milk than the other. It could be, again, because there was more stimulation on that side. Maybe there's more milk producing tissue on that side too. I have parents tell me that during one pregnancy, they had one breast that was the leader, and then during the next pregnancy, they had the other side. So I think it really is probably more stimulation dependent and how much use that breast got. So let's answer, so that question's answered. And then the one about the period, could you repeat that to me again?
Yes. Why does my supply drop a week before my period and during?
Okay, so that's the hormone shift, right? We start to have that estrogen withdrawal. Our hormones start to shift, and it can impact milk production a little bit. So it's very common. After a few days into the period, typically things start to come up again. So people will start to chart things, so they kind of have a little idea, and they might start taking some galactagogues, maybe like moringa or goat's rue, shatavari, right before they notice they're about to start their period, just to kind of have that little extra oomph. So that's normal. And it usually starts to regulate after several months. Like the body kind of is not in shock when it has its period. Yeah.
Were those all the questions?
Yes. Thank you, Sheila.
Sure.
Those were great questions. And if anyone has any more, feel free to jump online again with our different, we are on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and I know I'm forgetting one, Carolina, YouTube as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So this will be available for replay on YouTube and Facebook, and we'll also be making it available as smaller segments for those just having available for shorter listening period time. Thank you guys so much again for joining us. And Sheila, it's just always so great to have your expertise and letting people know again that it's normal. It's fine.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody.